My big update with Project Teacup. I love that advice. I love how scathing it is. Sweet summer child, it doesn't work that way. Are you going to do another group trip? Do you think that having a platform is a must for new debut authors? Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Welcome to this Q&A. It has been a little while since I last did Q&A. I think it was at the end of me finishing Project Teacup Draft 5 or maybe around the time I got my literary agent, something like that. It's been like 6 months since I've sat down and had a chat with you guys like this, so I wanted to do that again. I actually went out onto Instagram to ask all of these questions, so if you ever want to be a part of Q&As in the future, please feel free to follow me on Instagram. That's where I tend to do my Q&A callouts because it's the easiest place for me to do them. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the questions. I think I have like 25-ish questions here roughly. I did count them, I've already forgotten. I've put them in little folders, and if I look down at any point, it's because my laptop is right here. Let's jump to the big one. This is the question I got the most. It's the question I've been getting over the last few months over and over again. What is the latest update on Project Teacup? So if you're new here, hello, welcome. My name is Christy. I am a writer and book reviewer and content creator and illustrator. I do too many things, if I'm being honest, but I finished writing a novel at the end of last year. I queried that novel. It was a whole ordeal. I made a video about it, got a literary agent, have been working with that literary agent since December. I've now finished draft 6 of the novel, and essentially the update is that we're now preparing the book for submission to publishers. It's really interesting going through this process of documenting the writing of my novels and getting a literary agent, and I love having the opportunity to be candid and honest and to show how like tough this can be sometimes, and you know, like how stressful it can be, and to be really authentic about the journey of what it's like to get a literary agent. But it's also really fascinating to see how many people don't really understand this process, or people who make assumptions. I've had so many people message me, comment and be like, so is the book out yet? Like why is it taking so long? And it's like, oh my goodness, sweet summer child, it doesn't work that way. I wish the timelines for publishing were really quick and speedy. You know, I self-published my last book, which was A Year in Tōkyō, and I was making edits to that book up until about 30 minutes before I launched it. I literally did a copy change 30 minutes before that book launched. But with traditional publishing, the timelines are much, much slower. The process of going on submission could take a while, and then if best case scenario, touch wood, that's touch wood, I am not superstitious. Touch wood, we get a publishing deal, you know, best case scenario, it's still gonna take quite a long time until I can announce anything. So essentially that's where we're at. We're about to start going on submission. I hope it's really soon. I worked really hard over the past, God knows, like 3 or 4 months to get the book as ready as I can for submission. I think we're still gonna have a couple little tweaks on it. You wanna absolutely put your best foot forward because you only get one chance at submitting a novel, and obviously that's a really big deal if you've spent a number of years working on it, which I have with Project Teacup. But yeah, my big update with Project Teacup is that there's no real update yet. I'm sorry. How did you find a literary agent? So I did a whole video. Is this side? How many years have I been doing this and I still don't know which side the card pops up on? Whichever side it is, I'll link the video. I documented the whole process of me getting a literary agent. Essentially, it was a process of me spending a long time researching literary agents, sending out manuscripts, cover letters, synopses, all of like the material you need to send out. It's actually mental, the process of getting a literary agent. I ended up with 6 offers of representation over my novel, and I think 10 total manuscript requests, which was amazing and so shocking at the time. And it was a roller coaster, and if you want more context you can go and watch that video. Biggest learning from the querying process. I think my biggest learning is probably something to do with patience and compartmentalization. The process of querying took 3 or 4 months. I think I was querying for about 99 days or something by the time that everything started kicking off and I finally started really getting responses and having to decide like which literary agent to pick. Querying is an incredibly stressful and lonely process that you can only really understand if you've gone through the ordeal of spending years writing a novel and then sending them out into the void. Agents get like thousands of submissions of queries of people who want to be represented by literary agents, and they only tend to pick 1 or 2 people per year, and so it's incredibly competitive. It's really hard to get an agent. It was just a fantastic learning opportunity in the realm of patience and learning how to distract myself when things like querying are being stressful. What next step of traditional publishing are you most excited about? Honestly, the thing that makes me the most excited is just the thought of people reading the book. Like, obviously nothing is guaranteed in publishing. Just because you have a literary agent doesn't mean you're going to get a book deal. Just because you get a book deal doesn't mean you're going to get a second book deal. This is a very challenging industry to get into and then to stay in. However, the thing that brings me so much joy, like it's almost hard to describe how much joy it brings me, is the experience of having people read your work. Like, I remember the very first time I read my work aloud to people, and it was in a class I did in university, and the class was called So You Want to Write a Novel. It was the easiest class I ever did at uni. It was the highest grade I ever got at university. We would do these 2-hour workshops, and eventually you would go around and you would read the first chapter of your novel or whatever. And this is the novel that I queried back in 2020 that never ended up finding an agent. That book is very much dead, but I read the first chapter of that book to this class back when I was in university, and seeing the way people reacted, like getting to see the effect that my words had on other people, seeing them feeling things. There's something incredibly magical about it to me. So whether that's editors, no matter who it is, I just think being able to share my writing with people is something that I'm really, really excited about. What are your best tips for world building? Obviously, I'm not an expert because I'm not a published novelist, but I do love world building, and I've spent a long time doing world building. I think the best thing, in my opinion, that an author can do is have moments of specificity. You know, it's great for the world to have like great big histories and politics and wars and all of these things, but I also think it's really important to make your world feel real, to add little tiny things that are very specific and very realistic. It needs to feel like the myriad people in that world are just going about their own lives as if they were in our own world. How do people vote for a new government? How do people get their food shopping? How do people use the telephone or don't use the telephone in this world? And so you can't put everything in, but being able to sprinkle little tiny specifics of how a world works, I think, is really important for creating verisimilitude, which is a very fancy way of saying like realism in your work. What is your tip for a beginner writer? My favorite tip, my favorite piece of advice is to just sit down and write. And honestly, that sounds so silly and obvious, but I remember I was reading this article in the New Yorker maybe 8 years ago. It was a really long time ago, and there was this line that really stuck with me that said, "So you're a writer? Right." I love that advice. I love how scathing it is, because it's just like, if you want to be a writer, there's no specific thing you need. You don't need a master's degree. You don't need this book or that pen. You just need to sit down and write. And I think also keeping in mind that writing is tough, problem solving is tough, learning a new skill is tough. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean you're bad at it. Do you hope to do a book tour when Project Teacup gets published? I love your confidence. I love your assumption that Project Teacup is definitely getting a publishing deal. I appreciate it. It would be a dream come true, a massive, massive dream come true. Aside from like just getting a publishing deal, I cannot think of anything that would be cooler than getting to go on book tour. Do you think that having a platform is a must for new debut authors nowadays, or a big social media myth? I'm worried that by being no one, it will lower my chances of getting a debut. This is an amazing question, and I get it all of the time. People who have like reached out to me to be like, if I don't have a YouTube channel, if I don't have a TikTok, is there any point in me bothering? And the answer is, of course there is. If you've written an amazing book that has marketability, you are going to get a book deal. I had a YouTube channel with a decent amount of subscribers the last time I queried a novel. It still got rejected. I had more subscribers the second time I tried to query, and I let everyone know in the cover letter that, hey, I also have a YouTube channel where I talk about books, because there's a little bit in the cover letter where you say a little bit about yourself. I let everyone know that I had a YouTube channel. No one gave a shit. No one cared. I still got ignored for months and months and months on end. So no, I don't think it's necessary at all. Obviously, I have not gone on sub to a publisher, so I can't speak to the specifics of that. But we also do know now that so many celebrity memoirs bomb. Like, if this was 7 or 8 years ago, during the time of Zoella getting her book deal and all of those big YouTubers getting book deals, and, you know, the first booktubers getting book deals, that would have been the time where having a social media following would have guaranteed you a book deal. But we don't live in that world anymore. Audiences are not guaranteed to buy something something just because they watch someone. Like it depends on so many factors. The thing that will get you a book deal is writing a good book. And obviously having a social media following is a nice to have. It is a good jumping off point, but it is not the be all and end all. How do you maintain integrity while having to make a living off of views and subscriptions? I love this question. This is such an interesting question. So I basically overthink everything I do. I turn down 90% of the brands that reach out to me. I am very, very picky when it comes to the sponsorships I do. I try very hard to be ethically minded. Like I research everything, and I would never promote a product that I would not genuinely use myself. You know, I've had a few like cool brands reach out to me relatively recently, but because they use AI in ways that I can't guarantee have been ethically done, like I've just said like a blanket no. And so for me, it all kind of comes out of a place of gratitude to my audience. Really, I think that although there are parts to being a content creator that are quite difficult, this is quite a challenging job. It's very intellectually difficult. I work very long hours. Video editing takes a long time, but I'm really, really grateful that I get to be in a position where I can be creative as a job. Like that is quite rare, and I feel a lot of gratitude. And a part of that gratitude is me feeling quite protective over my audience and making sure that my audience is not being taken advantage of. One of the best things I've done for my channel is get an agent who now manages all of my sponsorships, which is really good because they can be the person to manage all of that, do the negotiating. And then I'm also really picky in terms of the things that I release and put in front of you guys. I have been looking into merch for the longest time. I've been wanting to release some Notion templates, presets on my website, but I need to make sure they're as good quality as possible before I put them in front of people. I hate like asking people to pay for things. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like every time someone tells me they bought a year in Tōkyō, there's a part of me that feels bad, and I really should interrogate that. Like if a friend of mine is like, oh, I want to buy your book, I tend to just give it to them, even though they tend to insist that they want to pay for it. I think because I've spent so much of my life coming from a really frugal context, you know, I grew up working class, there was never really any money for lovely things like books and things like that. And so whenever I'm pricing things, I try to make them as cheap as possible. I want to make sure that everything I put in front of you guys is as good quality as possible. Even A Year in Tōkyō, like the physical copies of that book, I make so little money on those. Like you're supposed to make a lot of money when you self-publish books. Generally, the rule is when you self-publish a novel, you're making like $8 a book, which is huge compared to traditional publishing. But because A Year in Tōkyō is entirely in color, and I didn't want to jack up the price to being like $40 a copy, it means that I don't earn very much, and it's still expensive. It's still like $30 for a book depending on where you are. Basically, integrity and ethics around money are really, really important to me, and I put a lot of thought into it. Pros and cons of studying writing at university. I love this question. I get asked about university and whether you need a master's degree to write and all this stuff all the time. Biggest cons are how expensive it is. I am still paying off my student debt, which is pretty standard for anyone who went to university in Australia. The indexation last year was so bad. So the cons, definitely the money, definitely how expensive it is. Another con that I ran into when I was doing my postgrad stuff is that for those of you who don't know, I was doing a master's degree, and then I had to drop out early because it was too hard for me to juggle full-time work, YouTube, and all of the writing stuff I was doing. So I graduated early with half a master's degree, which is a graduate diploma. And that was a really tough choice for me, but I loved the studying that I did, and it would be such a dream come true for me to go back and finish my master's degree one day. But another con that I had was that some of my teachers were quite snobby, and I took umbrage with that. Like I have a real problem with the Australian literary scene's snobbishness just generally. I got a lot of scathing comments for writing fantasy. Some of the feedback was terribly unkind, both in my undergrad and my postgrad. Like a lot of academics in writing can be quite snobby, which I hate that so much, but it's I also had a lot of people who I met during my degree and my tertiary education who were lovely, beautiful people who I really enjoyed sharing my work with. Pros to studying writing, like there are so many. It's really fun. You learn so much. It's a great opportunity to get feedback on your work. But I will say, as always, studying writing formally at a tertiary level is a nice to have. You absolutely do not need it to be a successful writer, to be a talented writer, or to publish a novel. Do you ever see yourself teaching again in the future? So for those of you who don't know, I was also an English teacher at one point I used to teach English in Japan. Mostly I taught 3-year-olds to 12-year-olds. I loved teaching. It was so much fun. Like it was such a joyful experience. I loved getting to be a part of these kids' journey into learning English. It took me by total surprise because like teaching as a career path is not something I would have ever considered, especially at like a high school level, because I, for a lot of it, really didn't like high school. So like I was always like, I'm never going into English teaching. I'm not going back there. I would one day love to be a lecturer, especially in the realm of fantasy literature or creative writing. I love academia. I love writing essays. I love research. I miss my JSTOR account so much. But yeah, I would love one day to do some kind of lecturing. I think that would be really fun. Do you think you'll ever live in Tokyo or abroad again? So I would love to live in Japan again. I would also love to live maybe in the UK for a little bit. Those are the two places I would be considering. I have no idea when or how or what visa I would do. Actually, the UK is far easier because I'm Australian and I also have British heritage, and so there's quite a number of visa options for me and Tyler for the UK. Japan is obviously a lot harder from the visa perspective. Do you still practice speaking/reading Japanese? My goal is to eventually be able to read novels in Japanese, and I've accepted the fact that that's going to be a lifelong goal that's going to take me a very long time. My Japanese is getting better and better constantly. I've now started listening to podcasts in Japanese just like as I'm walking. I've done the thing where I like watch movies without subtitles like in Japanese. Also gotten into the habit of like trying to read picture books, so I'm slowly getting there. My confidence with speaking Japanese is getting a lot higher as well, and every time I go back to Japan I learn more and more, which is wonderful. Your favorite thing/place ever in Tokyo/Japan? So in Tokyo, maybe the Ghibli Museum. It's just magical. It's so magical. I love it to bits. A lot of people have asked me, do you have updated recommendations for Japan and all this stuff, and the places I love are still the same places I mentioned in a year in Tokyo. Other happy places for me are Daikanyama Tea Site. I now really love the Haruki Murakami room at Waseda University. That's a really like happy place for me. And then in terms of like Japan generally, I loved Kobe, specifically the herb gardens in Kobe. I also really loved Himeji when we went there. Himeji Castle was really magical. What's your favorite city? Tokyo, right? You are absolutely correct. My favorite city ever is Tokyo. That's my alarm to remind me to go to my doctor's appointment. Let's just speed through the rest of these questions. I also really loved London. Like I thought I was going to love Edinburgh more than London, but it surprised me how much I felt attached to London and how immediately I loved it. Are you going to do another group trip? I've been waiting for this question to come up at some point because I did mention that I wanted to do another group trip back in May of 2023. Like I hosted this trip where myself, Tyler, and like 20-ish other people went to Japan over the course of a week. It was such a fun experience. Like I loved that week from start to finish. Genuinely, that was such a special week. Would I want to do another group trip? Absolutely, I would love to. TLDR of the whole thing is that I tried to organize another group trip and the itinerary was just far too expensive. The yen is so weak right now, and I tried to barter the price down, and unfortunately that couldn't happen either. And how many countries have you been to? So most of our travel up until relatively recently was through Asia. So Japan, Hong Kong, and like mainland China. We went to Beijing, South Korea, Singapore, US, England, Scotland, France, Norway, Australia. So that's 10. Oh, New Zealand. Oh, 11 countries, I believe, that we've been to. We've been really lucky to have been able to travel as much as we have. We've also sacrificed and saved and budgeted and done so many things so that we can travel. We also try to travel quite smartly. So we'll do hotel deals, we'll get flight points. This most recent trip to Japan, the flights were basically free because of flight points. We stayed in cheap Airbnb. There's a lot of stuff that we do to make travel possible for us. All right, last few questions. Favorite things about living in Adelaide? I love how clean it is. I love how safe it is. I love how warm and friendly everyone is. I never really realized this until the bout of international travel that we've just done to America and to Europe. I've realized how warm and friendly and lovely Adelaide people are just generally. I also love our cafes. We have a really beautiful cafe scene here. I also love the Central Markets. My favorite place in the whole of Adelaide is the Central Markets. If you're coming on a trip to Adelaide, you have to go there. Keep in mind though that they're closed Sundays, Mondays, and a lot of the retailers are closed Wednesdays, so just pick a good day to go to the markets. What kind of kid were you? I was a very dreamy, oversensitive child who smiled very easily but also cried very easily. What is your favorite Australian animal? I have so many. I feel very, very protective and patriotic over Australian native animals. At the moment, I'll probably say wombat because they are nonsense creatures. They're so cute. And I've never seen a wombat in the wild, which makes me very sad. I've also never seen a platypus in the wild. God, I love platypuses. I think for creatures I could conceivably see in the wild here, potoroos are really, really cute. They're so small. If you go to Cleveland Wildlife Park, you can actually feed them. Possums are adorable. I grew up around boatloads of kangaroos. Oh, kookaburras, they're so round. What are your favorite spots in Adelaide to visit? How about Melbourne? Okay, so in Adelaide, I already said the Central Markets. I love Muscovado and Cielo. So many restaurants around Goodger Street area and like the Chinatown area of Adelaide. Our restaurants are really, really good. We especially have really good Vietnamese food and Indian food. How about Melbourne? I love the State Library. It's very, very pretty. I also really love Hopton tea rooms. Hello, what's your biggest dream? I probably should have put this in with all of the writing questions. My biggest dream is to publish a novel. Like that's been my biggest dream since I was a very, very small child, to become an author. That's still the biggest thing for me. How to get out of a reading slump. Read small books. Start borrowing books from the library so that you don't feel bad about DNFing them and abandoning them. Reread your favorite books. Who are your favorite Australian authors and why? So for like contemporary books, I would say Holly Ringland. The way that she depicts natural imagery is really, really beautiful. For fantasy writers, I would say Shelley Parker Chan. I love the way that they wrote She Who Became the Sun. I haven't read the sequel yet, but the world building and the storytelling in that book was excellent. And the very last question, what are 3 things beside writing and reading that make you happy? The main one is travel. Travel makes me boundlessly happy. I think it's the most self-indulgent form of joy that like my partner and I have. Like it's so much fun. Second thing that makes me boundlessly happy is dogs and cats. Anyone's pets. I love animals. If there is a dog present at any social situation, I want to cuddle it the whole time. I love pets. Third one is just my loved ones. It's a really, really simple answer, like spending time with my partner, spending time with my friends, spending time with the people that I love. Like it's so important in this day and age where so many of us are terribly online to spend time with the people that we love and to get off the internet every now and then. It's good for your mental health. I hope you guys enjoyed this Q&A. I hope I answered some interesting questions for you. I am almost running late for my doctor's appointment, so I do need to leave in a second, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone over on Patreon for supporting my channel. Without Patreon, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. So as a thank you to my patrons, we have a whole bunch of bonus content over there, our book club, our Discord server, our bespoke content. I am this week uploading a like 2024 favorites video, all of my favorites so far this year. I also post writing updates over there. We have so much bonus content over on Patreon. So if you want to support my work, please feel free to check that out. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh my God, I need to be at the doctor's in 15 minutes. No! Why am I like